hello.
Pew, pew, pew.
Yes.
That's a little like high pitched there, but whatever.
I like it. You guys know who it is. It's Samantha and Zessie.
It's your boy Ramoy George Phillip the first, aka Swish Swish.
Oh, still.
Oh, I've been hooping all summer.
Oh, nice. That's nice. This is Masculinity, you guys, and I'm happy you've been hooping all summer. I've been beaching all summer. It has been.
Show off.
What do you mean? I mean, that's not a skill. I just bring rosé to the beach and like drink it and then go in the water.
Beach and bougie.
I'm beach and bougie. I will take that, beach and bougie.
Can I tell you about my beach and bougie situation the other day?
Please do.
Because in the end, it wasn't mad bougie. It was mad poor person. But I was in Myrtle Beach for a wedding, and I woke up on Saturday morning. I was at this beach house. Don't ask me how. Like literally,
that's pretty bougie.
On the beach,
Mad
bougie. Sitting in this like patio reading a beautiful book. Then every like 20 minutes, like, you know what? I'm just gonna go swim in the ocean, and I do that. And I came back, and then at one point I was reflecting on like what an incredible like chill bougie like I'm king of the world moment.
Yep.
And then I bit into a peanut or something, and then I broke my tooth, and then I was like suddenly like, I don't know if I have dental insurance. I don't.
Oh.
I'm in South Carolina, and my dentist is in New York. Oh no.
Damn.
It was a sudden decline.
That sounds like
some
a very
real adult shit.
Yeah.
Back to reality.
What? Yeah.
Oops,
I'm sorry. So wait, so you broke your tooth on a peanut?
On something.
That's deep.
It doesn't really hurt, but I can feel a giant hole in one of my teeth. So that's cool.
You might want to have that looked at, bro.
Can I tell you something else I did this summer?
Please.
I wrote. Okay, for those who, let me just backtrack. For those of us who listen to good podcasts like The Watch, and if you're listening to this podcast, you listen to good podcasts. You know that Andy Greenwald is a podcaster, film critic, and now showrunning his own show for AMC, coming out soon. And I feel like the Brown Andy Greenwald in training because we're podcasting here. And I've written, and now we're directing and putting together our first show for the Vert app called Other Colors. It's in production right now.
This is actually a plug. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Hell yeah, it's a plug.
I was like, where are we going with this? Got it. Continue.
But it's in production. We shot the pilot. The pilot is hilarious and so good. Shout out to the Wheel of Pretty. And we're just making TV out here and podcasts.
That's what's up. Ask Ramoy if he's shown me the pilot.
It's not done.
Whatever. It's cool, dude. No problem. Well, listen, guys. I mean, this is our bonus episode, right? Because you guys were like, "Oh, well, we thought they were done," but we're not. We're here because there's some things to talk about. I mean, first of all, there's one thing that I don't want to not say. Okay, like a couple weeks ago, there've been a couple allegations around people or against people who actually stand and work in the gender equality field, and it's kind of uncomfortable for us to bring this up, at least for me, because I know that a couple of those allegations were against Michael Kimmel, and he's been on the show before. And I think it would be weird for me to stay silent about it. And I've had this conversation with a good friend of mine who you guys have heard on the show as well, Jason Tandabibiana, about what to do in moments like this. And all I want to say is that no one is above the law when it comes to this, And I feel like if there's something to own up to, then people need to own up to it. And that's it. And, we're all human. We all fall short and do bullshit sometimes, hopefully not harming others. But I think it's important to say that just because somebody is in a specific position that has to do with gender equality or equality of any kind does not mean that they're not on some bullshit. And I'm not saying that I know exactly what happened with Dr. Kimmel. I'm just saying that I'm not partial when it comes to that. So,
yeah, I mean, I think an important thing to note is here what you always talk about. We're all supposed to be held accountable, no matter what position or place of status or celebrity or advocacy you're in. You need to be held accountable too. And again, I don't know what happened. I don't know the exact details, but if there's any, modicum of truth to these allegations, we hope to even hold our leaders accountable.
That's true.
Kind of continue the example and this new threshold and paradigm shift of gender equality, where everybody's held accountable.
That's right. We've had our moments here where we've had the opportunity to talk about a lot of different things. And I think a lot of times while we're being very insightful and constructive about dealing with the performance of masculinity, generally, we haven't really focused hardcore or non-cisgender, non-heterosexual experiences all that much. And I think in this day and age, we really, like if we're going to be talking about having a context in which people are valued, they're supported, and their voices are highlighted, it's important to bring non-cis het voices to the fore as much as it is the former, right? So we're really excited about today.
Yeah, I mean, in previous episodes, we've talked about the ways that white supremacy and patriarchy are intertwined and the ways that this can really impact black men and men of color and boys as well systematically. But we really haven't factored in like sexuality, and it's important to acknowledge that we don't generally stop to think about how someone's sexuality will most absolutely and definitively impact the way they experience life. So since one of the byproducts of living in this kind of patriarchal society is to assume everyone is straight and straightness and cisness until proven otherwise, today we want to backtrack and practice what we preach and be very intentional about validating the LGBTQ experiences and community as normative as well.
Yes, I mean, again, this is definitely not something that we're going to do on our own. And my full disclaimer is that having this conversation has me a bit nervous, honestly, because I don't want to be irresponsible with my language, and specifically coming from some unchecked hetero privilege, right, that I'm not even paying attention to. So I just want to put that out there with the hope that we can have an open and honest dialogue, understanding that sometimes we may mess up, but that we really want to do so in a safe space.
Who, you?
I mean, mostly me.
No, we
mostly
all mess
me.
up, and that's the point.
So today, acclaimed writer and activist Darnell Moore joins us on the show.
Pew, pew, pew.
Yeah. So the eloquence of the writing and your gift for imagery is inspiring, and we're just super excited to have you on the show today.
I'm so grateful to be here.
Thank you.
I'm so juiced. So, you know, Darnell's work centers on advocacy, on marginal identity, youth development, and other social justice issues in the U.S. and abroad. And his writing has been published in many publications, and we don't have time to name them all, but a few include MSNBC, The Guardian, Huffington Post, Ebony, along with a number of scholarly journals.
Yo, brush those shoulders off real quick. It's cool.
I was like, you have to pay to access them? Cool. So he also received the 2012 Humanitarian Award from the American Conference on Diversity for his advocacy in the city of Newark as the chair of LGBTQ Concerns Advisory Commission. So I'm excited to talk more about that. Darnell has taught at various universities, including Rutgers, Vassar, and Fordham, and he is currently head of strategy and programs for the U.S. at Breakthrough.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So and it's a.
Is there something you haven't done or don't do?
Yeah, I was like, how do you have time?
Apparently, I haven't rested. But Breakthrough is a global organization based in India, which is our larger organization in the United States.
Dope. So I mean, on top of all of that, you just released your book, No Ashes in the Fire, Coming of Age Black and Free in America. Is it Free and Black or Black and Free?
Black and Free.
Black and Free in America. And it's so good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm like super honored for you to be here. I'm so glad that you made the time to be with us today so you can, impart your experience, knowledge, your presence on the show.
I'm honored to be here and in my hood, but in Brooklyn, so this feels good.
Oh,
yeah.
What part you grew up in?
I grew up in New Jersey, in Camden, but I live in Bed-Stuy.
Oh, nice.
We're all neighbors.
Yeah,
yes.
I know. So good. So I just read the book, and it's just really, it's just a very well painted picture of a life, right? It's like when I think of a memoir, I really think of, I don't really think of that, but it did for me what I thought a memoir should do. So, I feel like we're really with you, we're rooting for you, we're crying with you, and having read this, it's like, it's clear that you're really great at creating a vivid picture, but also you contextualize it, right? You contextualize it in the real time at that time.
Yeah.
Like what was happening historically, what was happening politically, what was happening, in the area. And so, mostly we really get to know the systemic failures of the country. And it's just beautiful to kind of see your resilience and like you being able to channel the love and resilience of your community in that fuckery, essentially. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, was there like an impetus for getting you to get this book out now, or to write this book or finish this book out now, or is it just a happenstance, or what's the genesis of that?
It was happenstance. you know, I the book that's before that you read isn't the book that I intended to write.
What does that mean?
So, you know, I was the book had been germinating for about 3 to 4 years.
Cool.
And I had intended it for it to be a different type of book. I didn't want to write a memoir, so I should start there. I was really interested in like writing a cultural criticism book, like something very theoretical, esoteric,
a little snarky,
some shit up in the air.
Yeah.
Only because I wasn't ready at the time to really put my heart on the page in that way.
Sure.
And Coates, who this quote, I repeat this everywhere I go, when asked what would he tell someone who was writing a memoir, what advice would you give, said to not fucking lie. And I was like, oh, you know, to write a memoir is to tell the truth. And certainly you have to be ready and be okay with staring at the truth and telling the truth about a life, about the places in which we come from. And it took me some time to get there. So I actually had people around me that kept saying, this is really good what you're doing, but the stories are really what's sticking out to us. The stories are compelling us to feel, to think. And it dawned upon me that, you know, our narratives can do what theory attempts to do in so many ways. And often theory can produce change.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to be able to write a story where a young person or an older person, whoever, can pick it up and without me ever having to use Kimberly Crenshaw's term intersectionality, they would read it. They would read my mama's story and go, oh, I get what it means to be a black girl who had a child very young, growing up in an urban space like Camden, under-resourced, and I mean that both in her bank account that she didn't have and in terms of opportunities, you know, brutalized by the fist of the person that she loved and also the fist of the state. Without ever having to use that word, I wanted somebody to be able to pick it up and get it.
Yeah.
So that's the book. I'm grateful. Thank you for those kind words. I'm overwhelmed, I guess, by the responses to it. I had 2 goals. One is to write a book that black people can be proud of, and 2, to write a book that young queer and trans and gender nonconforming and straight black young people could pick up and see semblances of their lives in it and go, oh, I get it. And I wanted them to be able to look at it and not make the choices that I made, but actually make a choice to do things different, to not be like me and waste 2 decades trying to not be here. And possibly pick it up and go, oh shit, I have a right to exist, to live, to be honest about who I am, to be okay in my skin, to look in the mirror and love myself. I wrote it for them. So all this other stuff is like icing on the cake. You know, it was like, it's a first book. So it's like, damn, it was an Oprah's summer reading guide.
That's
and
fantastic.
Barnes and Noble's Discover Great New Readers book and really stunning review in New York. And I'm just like, shit, I wasn't expecting this.
I mean, but that's the power of what you're talking about is the power of narrative. And this is what the hope, I think, with all people who are thinking about creating narrative and stories, whether it's honest to God truth and memoir or whether it's in creative fiction, is the fact that you're trying to help find a person in the audience or connect with somebody in the audience to make them feel less alone, to provide a story for them where they can see it and look in the mirror and be like, oh, I've experienced that. And that for a while made me feel crazy, sad, alone, hopeless. But now I feel less of that because I see a story that reflects my same experience. So it's so cool to know that your stories are out there and can have that kind of incredible magnitude and capacity.
Oh, and there's so many good stories out right now. Black people are out here writing shit. Black women, too, are killing it. Oh, my God.
It's like so invigorating. It's so invigorating. I mean, and I want to talk more and more and more about everything, but there's so many specific instances in the book that just create this context of humanity, of humanizing. I think that is, really missing in a lot of writing, and is missing, I think, in the way that we're able to understand and relate to each other as people.
Yeah.
And one of the instances, I mean, which is quite an extreme instance, right, is like, I mean, you guys, spoiler alert, just go read the book. But there's an instance that you describe where, you know, you're like walking, I think, home from school, and there's like kids who are like bullying you, but they're not just bullying you, right? They're actually trying to like set you on fire. Yeah. And you describe...
Not figuratively.
No.
Yeah,
not figuratively. Like actually physically, like I think they like douse you in gasoline and then try to... Like being inside your head at that moment is it's like a privilege. It's like nothing else.
It's jarring, I'm sure.
Yeah. What did you tell yourself for who you are as a person from that? Because I mean, we see you today. You know, you've written this amazing book and all of that, but like the genesis of everything you had to go through to get here.
I mean, I have to tell people that one of the harder parts about writing life story or personal narrative are the sort of travels one has to take back in time. Mm-hmm. And that isn't just like a genealogical historical travel, but like what it means to be present in your body and to feel the feels that you felt in a moment like that.
Reliving
certainly,
the traumas.
you know, at 13 and 14, when that happened, 14, I was not thinking about at this, you know, as a writer now, as an adult, I'm thinking about how easy it is for the state to dispose of black people, right? And what it means for us to not do to each other what the state does to us.
Yeah.
What it means to figure out ways to bring people to accountability and create opportunities for justice that is not always about sending them to jail. I wasn't thinking about that at 14, right? At 14, all I kept thinking about was, why would OB want to do this to me?
Yeah.
That's all I kept thinking about. Like, why? Like, why would you want to do this to somebody? And I kept thinking, what was going on in his life? Like, what was happening inside of him to make him want to do something like that? He was a little older than me, maybe by 2 years or 3 or so. The other thing I felt was fear, but the type of fear that becomes so normalized, and I need for people to understand what it means to do things like almost every other day, maneuvering and trying to find a different route home, right? Like, because you need to be out of the way of, like, I remember one time, like, I got chased home by like an entire like kind of neighborhood. It was just crazy. But the other thing I want to say about this is that what may seem like overly exceptional acts of violence impacting the lot that you read in the book, that moment is like, oh shit, like that has to be something that doesn't always happen. What I try to get across is that it's much more mundane than we imagine it to be. And in fact, if we're honest as readers, which is why I try to write the book in the way that I did, we might all find ourselves on the other side of instances where we, whether through our words or our actions, have committed violence of that type. Or our silence. And I admit to being not only bullied, but also I bullied people too. Yeah. So, you know, part of what I do too is try to tell, like, so there is a young brother, and I'm even doing a type of violence to him now. He actually probably would not identify as a brother. Their name was Wani Wallace, a 17-year-old in Camden, in the same neighborhood around the corner from where that incident happened to me. Wani, who was gender nonconforming, who folk picked on all the time, according to reports. People called him sissy, fag, talked about the way they walked. As they were walking down the street at nighttime, some assailants shot Wani in the back of the head and killed him. So This is 15 to 20 years after that incident happened with me. I survived that fire. Wani didn't. Yeah. And it was important for me to say that, yeah, resiliency, that's some cool words we like to use. Strength and courage and all that shit. That's great. But some people, I don't care how strong you are. I don't care how magical you are. When forces, whether that's the fist or ideologies, are targeted at you all the time, it's sometimes to take us out of here. And that's what I wanted to get across in the book.
So as a follow-up question to that, I mean, we talk about the humanity of it, and now we have this question also of like the reasons they gave for like doing this, right? How does that translate to you kind of understanding yourself as a young boy, as a young man?
Yeah, so here's what I know. I know that we all come to be who we are because we're shaped by so many forces. So like we're brought and literally born into a world that is already ready to shape us into the type of boys and men it desires of us to be. Right. So certainly what I say too is that the same OB carried gasoline in this particular incident, and I did too. I think we both had our quote unquote metaphorical gasolines. We were taught, both of us, that boys should be tough, and you show that toughness by using your hands, literally. and sometimes you're using it to fight and to assert power over other folk who are identified as boys or who identify themselves as such, and other times you use it to assert power over girls. You shut your emotions off. You do not cry. You do not shed a tear. You do not show any signs of softness. In fact, you kill any aspect of softness within yourself. These were all lessons that both OB and I learned together. Yeah. And in so many ways, I, like OB, took those lessons in. I talk about looking at pictures of myself over time, and I could see the smile disappearing from my face. I could see the softness disappearing from my face as you look at pictures. I could see a young boy who was free, who sang, who danced, who was probably queer. And what I mean by that is not even gay, but free from all of the restrictive ideas that was awaiting me far before I had even identified as such. And like, you can, if you, like, there's pictures in the book, you can see, let me go from smiling to like hard.
Yeah.
And that is what the world and what patriarchy, and sometimes I hate to use that word, but what this idea of manhood, a type of manhood that is all about dominance and control over the, not only the sort of bedroom, but the boardroom and every room, does to us. It kills our humanity. It kills our humanity.
And I want to kind of jump to the way that you kind of paint a picture of your father in the book, because there's like this scene that you describe, right, where he's giving you a bath and he's like teaching you how to bathe.
Everybody brings this scene up
because it's so
important to me.
It's just so sensory, and you talk about how he, at that moment he's using his hands to teach, to love, to nurture, and then there are other times when he's using his hands to hurt.
Mm-hmm. And
when you say the notions of being a man, like I imagine that in your transformation, I mean I can only assume that there was a transformation in writing this book, right?
Oh my God, I'm a different person on this side of it.
Yeah, and so. Like the relationship that you have, because I remember at the talk, when I saw you at the Brooklyn Historical Society, you're talking about like, you having a different book as a result of your father passing.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder, like, understanding who you are as a man, who you are kind of in this context of patriarchy and masculinity, how that impacted the way that you started to see your father. And like what you took from him, what you didn't, all of those things.
So I'll honor him. His name is Grafton Harity, and honor his spirit, really, by saying that he, as spirit, probably now, what he felt or probably didn't get a chance to teach me while he was alive. I'm certainly learning through his transcendence. I feel like he's teaching me now. We're probably teaching each other something. In fact, I had, surprisingly enough, somebody wrote me a letter. They found my address. I don't know how they found my address, y'all. That's just a scary thing. But wrote me this 20-page letter and pretty much said that. They were like, I read your book and the work between you and your father have only just begun.
Wow.
I know that was a bit strange, but I received it after deep. I was like, let me swipe the internet clean of any semblance of my address. But I honor him and honor our journey together because I have certainly been changed through his transition. My dad was a boy when I was born. He was 15. And that is important to name. And I repeat all the time that I did not have an awareness. When you talk about your parents, you imagine parents as we adultify them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was writing a book and I was like, oh, and he was 15. I was like, shit, at 15, what was I doing? At 15, I had no clue of how to pee straight. Like, I didn't know anything about the world.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how to look. I'm old now. I got gray hair. I'm telling you, I would struggle raising a child. You see what I'm saying?
Talk about it.
I know.
So I'm like 15. So that point, I was like, oh wait, okay. I had to empathize with what it meant to be thrust into the world at 15, already conditioned in a community where he had been named Sweet Daddy, Boo Boo, like get the names, how that shapes the way that shapes the type of boy you are, the man you become, or whatever.
Yeah.
And he has this kid. I'm like, damn. So how do you then raise a child and you yourself are being raised at the same time? We're both learning lessons, really. And those lessons are backfiring and they're being sort of given to me. That helped me to really see him in a different type of way. Also, when I was talking to my mother, who I always say had every right to be upset with this man, to hate him, to call him all types of names, for the ways that he violently brutalized her. When I said, how do you forget, like, when he passed, like, how are you so, like, good with, like, making sure his funeral's okay and going to the funeral? And she said, and with complete, like, serenity, well, one, like, she's like, I've come to make peace with this. Now, that peace does not mean that the memories are not fresh and that the traumas aren't present. It means, she told me that too, because she actually told me while she was reading the book, so much of what she forgot, she just sort of blocked it out, which is what trauma does, right? Like, that's what we do. But she also said the person that, you imagine or who did all these horrible things, I also have so many memories of the good things he did. And she started naming them, and I was like, oh, wow. Like, the two most prominent is him attempting to intervene when she was almost sexually assaulted by someone. She was 16 when I was born. He was 15, so they're kids. And she said that he would sleep in the backyard of her house and got beat up by the person that tried to assault her. So he got beat up for protecting the person he would end up beating. He also would feed her when she didn't have food and when she was hungry. And she started saying all of these things. And it made me just think about, one, what it meant to freeze him into this antagonist sort of role, what it meant to only look at him as a monster, and to not be, and to resist parsing out and being very clear, like, here are some this is the fuck shit you did. Let's be very clear. And you're wrong for that.
Yeah.
But that does not mean that grace and accountability and what we might call transformative or restorative justice isn't also available. That made me look in the mirror and go, oh, it was easy for me to lift him up as the big monster in the room because it made me feel good about myself. Yeah. And I just think about particularly dudes, like, we would go off on, like, R. Kelly and Weinstein and all these folk and not realize that our hands are complicit in the making and the continual violence committed by folk like this via our silences, via our acquiescence to all of these rules that we are told we're supposed to follow, and I can go on and on. So the moment that we can say that I was able to look at him and see the monsters in myself is the moment that I was humbled. The last thing I'll say is I'm really, really thinking about what it means in a space, in a world, in a nation whose criminal justice apparatus is built on the project of anti-blackness. That is, like, always at the ready to dispose of us, what it means to imagine justice differently. Justice is not the jail cell. Because if that jail cell would have helped, my dad wouldn't have been in and out of it and coming out doing the same shit or worse off. Yeah. What he needed was community interventions, mental health supports, some shit that has not yet to exist. So I kept so today. What that means for me today is I'm in a moment right now where Me Too is happening, and where call out culture is rampant, and where we actually have to call out and name the things that ails us. We also need space to dream, and I'm glad I got Charlene's book in my hand that I'll shout out about what is needed in the place of the shit that doesn't work.
Like, where are we going?
Where are we going, and what do we want? Yeah. Like, do I want a person, like, and this is so bad, I'm gonna be very slanted here, but like I ain't think white men got their own shit, like they can do it. I ain't thinking about Weinstein here. I mean, we can have that discussion, but that's not what I'm thinking about. Like, what is now, let me, with somebody like R. Kelly, who is like resistant to any type of accountability measure.
Yeah.
This is a person that just put out another damn song that will just say it to you again. Y'all all wrong. I know, and tell you what he did, and then give you an excuse for it. Okay, right? Like, there are moments when these are the type of folk you have to figure out how to get them out of community so people can be safe. Let's just name that. And at the same time, but what might it mean to get somebody out of a community? Say to abolition isn't just, as Ruthie Wilson Gilmore, Black geographer, says, isn't just about abolishing the shit that harms us. It's about imagining what should go in its place.
Right.
When my dad was doing that, if we would not have had to call the cops, if there was some type of mechanism in our community, I don't know, maybe 7 people who were on a phone chain, that every time I saw my dad aggress, all I got to do is dial one number. And these 7 people would get together and come over to the house, and they would tell him in advance, when you aggress, we coming over.
Mm-hmm.
And we going to wrap ourselves around his mom, around this woman, so 1, she can be safe. But 2, we don't want you to go to prison or jail. So we going to be there, and we going to put our arms around her. We going to figure out what you need in a moment so you can calm your ass down, what type of support you need, whatever that might be. I'm giving an example, right, of like what the type of dreaming we need to do to think of if we are really about like the non-disposability of Black people, that means we are going to have to sit with what it means to not dispose of the people we love to call the monster. And that's hard shit. That's hard.
Well, it's really hard because in our general society, whatever pedagogy that we subscribe to or that we're force fed upon is like there's always a villain, and even in our communities we find a villain. Even if we can give them the benefit of the doubt, there's probably a sense of them being a victim, then inspiring them to be the victimizer. It's hard to not vilify them first and find them as the monster first, and not the human but the villain first, right? Well, I want to backtrack a bit because what you've talked about so incredibly is about like the way that now as an adult you're able to contextualize your father's experience and better understand him. And even though he created these, or he acted upon these horrible acts upon you and your mother specifically, you're able to understand him better now. He's teaching you things. And I'm wondering, with that line of thinking, both now as an adult and being able to contextualize his experience then, but as a kid as well, living with and under his reign, like, what did he kind of teach you about masculinity then and now? and again, this like system of masculinity.
What's interesting is that, and this is to you brought up the story about me. I write about him teaching me how to bathe, and there's this image that stays with me all the time of the 2 of us naked in the bathtub. He's 23 and I'm 8. He might be 22 and I'm 7, something like that. He was always so, when I think about softness and care, empathy and love, he's extended that to me. I mean, certainly he did things and like, he wanted to sort of man me up,
Sure.
like rough me up. I was very like quirky and he certainly did those things too. But in so many ways, he really did keep me. Now that I don't think I've thought about this, but I don't know if I've said this out loud or anywhere. He protected me in so many ways from societal ideas of what boys ought to be. I'm sure he had whispers from he grew up around a whole bunch of like hyper masculine men. But he did not, in a lot of ways, force me to be any of those things at all. And it's just weird dichotomy, because on one hand, he was the hyper masculine dude that was called Sweet Daddy, Boo Boo, Graft, who was performing his hyper masculinity, who allowed me space to be, which was quite interesting. Except, there were a few times where he upped the ante, but I think that had to do with him wanting me to be perceived by my peers in a certain way so as not to be picked on.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of like the grander conversation that we're always having. That is kind of what we talk about. That's what we're alluding to when we're talking about the system of masculinity that forces people to live within these confines or perform their identity in a certain way.
I mean, it's fun, and I actually call those confines, those ideas, cages. Manhood and boyhood are cages. Like, it's funny. So when you probably hear me now moving and dancing between language, partially because as a result of writing a book or just thinking a lot about what this means. I'm like, when people say, as a man or as a black man, I'm like,
Can we just talk about it as a person first?
Like that's where I've been. I'm like, what? What I'm striving to be is a better human being.
Yeah.
And the more I think about that, the more I relinquish all of the anxiety that comes from feeling as if I'm not meeting the roles or rules of what manhood be.
Sure.
Like, I'm free from that shit. Like, I'm just me.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels good. And that's what I want for black boys and men, to be freed up from this consequence of a larger historical pattern of colonial white supremacist ideological rule, and not just ideological but material rule.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think Samantha wants to talk about cages.
Yeah. Well, I had this whole question, right? I was like, what is the one thing that I want to know? Okay. And I mean, I feel like you kind of already touched on it, but the thing that I wonder about, there's a quote in the book that's brilliant. I'm going to pull my book out.
Uh-oh.
Here we go.
It says, I was no different than the black men I hated for hating me. And I had this question, like, but how you're an activist, you care about life, you care about people, but then and I'm thinking about this instance of like these boys trying to burn you when you were little, and I'm like, how do you deal with giving love to black men who are trying to threaten your existence when they're not for you?
Well, that quote is, I'm glad you brought that quote up, because if I can practice a type of love that is given towards the self, a self that too has been constructed to believe that in a family where I'm the oldest grandchild of more than 50 or 60, and a boy, man, who has always sort of been understood once my grandfather passed as like the man of the family or the patriarch, which afforded me so many privileges. I have 3 younger sisters, and I got to do things like walk all over the city without permission. If I would have came home under 18 or 16 and said I'm having sex, which I was, I think that and I didn't say it, even though I was, but I'm certain that would have gotten a type of so that's often you're given a badge.
Yeah, pat on the back.
Right. The sort of spaces I had to be free and just do things like pick the schools I wanted to go to and just do all of those things were afforded to me precisely because I was a boy and I was the oldest. Yeah. And the way that translated then into my relational life is like I had almost believed, because I had been surrounded by all women, pretty much all women and girls in my family, was that was, that women and girls were supposed to be at the ready to support, serve, and lift us up.
Yep.
That's what I learned, and that's what I practiced. So my point is, now if I can have an awareness of that and give love to myself, even after having utilized those privileges, I benefited from, am always constricted by misogyny, sexism, patriarchy, and all these things. Why the hell can I not look at a reflection of me and give love to that reflection? That is not to say, and this is where I want to be very clear, and I don't talk about cheap love or cheap grace. When I talk about forgiving my father, that's not in the strength of me just saying, oh, I forget everything you did. It's me saying, oh, I actually see it. I actually see, and I want to name the wrong that was done, and love is about, and grace is about giving you or a person the space to come to terms with that, to also for them to see and name it, and to turn away from it. Love is about building a bridge. So this isn't like cheap shit, like cheap grace or cheap love. It's like, I am you. We got the same lessons. We sit in the same barbershops and were quiet when they were talking shit about girls that walk by. And I have to own that. But I also believe it is in that self-reflective state and the ability of us to be honest. And that's the key. We love lies. To be honest about our shit. And I imagine right now the Me Too movement, women and girls wouldn't have to do, whether they're cis, transgender, femme, whatever. If dudes would just go, all right,
that's it.
This is our.
That's like literally.
Here's our work right now.
That is it. There's nothing else.
We done fucked up so much.
Yeah.
And not just girls and women, but ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's sit down without women and girls having to do the work of mothering us into a better person, of not teaching us how not to do to them the shit that harms them, and take that on as our own work. Man, we could be free. We could be so, and that's the thing. I've been so like, I mean, you're kind of like pushing me to. The second book project I'm imagining now is all about Black boys and men, intimacy and lovelessness.
Ooh.
And so like all of this is like it's so on my heart. It's just so on my heart.
Can I ask you about that? There's a moment in the book where you talk about, the first time that, like, when you started liking a boy and no one was asking you about it in your house.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how, like, if, your sister and, like, whoever, like, there was, like, this assumption, like, oh, who are you talking to? Who are you, dating or whatever? And there was, like, with this set, like, again, like, I felt like your book was really sensory. There was, like, a sense, like, a feeling that I got in my body of, like, loneliness when I was reading that. And then it brought this idea of cages on. I mean, it didn't bring that. You brought the idea of cages on, and I put the link together, right, of, like, this loneliness that occurs in trying to feel and trying to have and trying to be felt, and that just not happening.
Yeah. So loneliness I think it's a particular feature, and I'm not the first person to say this, of Black queer men and boys, gender nonconforming people, Black queer people's experiences. Loneliness is key. Well, one, it's a critical and shared experience or feeling. And think about it, I'm not talking about loneliness just as a point of like being trapped in a cage by yourself, but the type of loneliness that is best described this way. So you're a kid, you're in a full house like I was. I had a lot of family members, big old family, and we all lived in the same house. You know how the Black people do. And Black people and you're a kid in this home where heterosexuality, or the idea that young people go out and are automatically and naturally by default attracted to people of the same sex. So that means you come home, people automatically say things to you. If you're a boy, who that girl you was with, you must really like her. Or because of the way in which you're brought into the world, you're born into a world that normalizes that, you have no problem talking about the crush you have. But imagine being in a space where you learn to literally take like metaphorical pin and needle, or needle and thread, and like sew your mouth shut, such that you're in a space with so many people, but you're not seen as who you really are, such that you're not heard, such that your abilities to try to communicate difference is not at all understood. Yeah. And you can never speak the thing that you know to be true about yourself. Like that, it's like being in New York, like a city like Manhattan, like New York, around all of these people on an A train, and not being seen by any of them. That type of loneliness.
Yeah.
that is then exacerbated by being black. You understand? So that to me is, but then, it isn't just that's a very, 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 a feature that I see play out in black queer men's lives, even as adults. But it's also something I've been thinking a lot about with regards to men, and how inevitably patriarchy is deeply, deeply, the consequence of it is a type of loneliness.
Yeah.
A deep, deep hole and a deep, deep loneliness, because what it does, it severs or at least disallows intimacy at the levels that we need it. So what I mean by that is, when you're told that, I say that my stepfather, who was like a man's man, he's like a boxer. I had a gun in my face once, and as tears started rolling down my eyes, he said, "Stop crying." Or the counter to that,
Wait, that happened?
Yeah, that actually happened. But the counter to that, though, is I tell a story about being in high school, and I used to sleep in the bed with one of my high school friends, and we would hold each other at night. He's not gay. I didn't know if I was gay. Well, by that point, I kind of had a sense that I was multiply attracted to all types of people. But I recall that the story of my father and me in the bathtub naked, and the story of me laying with this boy in our home, never having sex, but just holding each other, as two critical images of black male intimacy that are disallowed. Mm-hmm. First, with my father, the reason why it was hard to write, because I knew that what it would do is cause people to jump ahead and to assume that sexual violence was going to happen at the end. Mm-hmm. Because they're like, oh, I know something got to happen. You cannot have a man and his child naked in the bathtub and nothing nasty happen. One, because black men and boys are you're seen as sexually lascivious, overly potent, sexual monsters. So certainly something sexual got to happen here. And that is a terrible type of violence done to us.
Yep.
That's number one. The second, with the story of my with the two of me and my friend, that story of that type of intimacy is so powerful to me. Like, what would it mean, like, if two bras, whatever you call themselves these days, like dudes, are like, damn, I need a hug right now. Come hold me. Just like hold me on this couch for like 45 minutes. I have a friend to this day that, like, I say to him something, or he'll say to me, come here.
Yeah.
And just sit in my arms.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, to not have that?
Yeah.
Do you know what that does to, like, the spirit? And we need it. We need it. And that's what I mean by a type of profound rupture. A profound rupture in intimacy that is best described as, like, utter loneliness.
Yeah.
That I wish we didn't have to have.
No, and I think it's interesting because whether you meant to or not, whether you know you have or not, you've like showed us how Samantha always talks about accountability and complicity, in the sense that we are all, if we partake in the system, accountable to building the cages and putting up the bars that put individuals in said cages. So even as something as small as like a mother figure, not expecting or normalizing straightness in the home and not keeping it open to a child to be whomever they are, in a way kind of helps build that cage. Yeah. Or whether it's a father demanding a son to be more of a man, or whether it's a brother not being brother or sibling or sister, whomever, not being sensitive to their sibling and being thoughtful enough to ask them personally or inquisitively about whomever they potentially may be attracted to, or so on and so forth. And it's always about like kind of just seeing that a little bit further and putting the spotlight on ourselves to know how that we are upholding a system and helping further kind of the system and these cages, but then also understanding how we can be better about disassembling these systems and help bring down these bars as individuals for ourselves and for those around us.
And I should then acknowledge my family as being the source of, they are like my life-giving source. And it's important. Literally.
Yeah.
And it's important for me to name that, that this particular family, from a predominantly black, under-resourced spot that was called a ghetto in the hood, were the most accepting people they saved my life. So like you talk about your sisters, if they were more open, my mom and my sisters would say today that my sister says, like they started reading letters that they were like, oh, we knew that shit all along. Like, we were reading your letters earlier. We just didn't know what to say to you. My mom said the same thing. Sure. And like, I'm so grateful for, and also my father, as interesting enough, his brother, the youngest one, my uncle, they're all on Facebook. They're like Facebook bandits, would always be up on my page. And I'm pretty open about a lot of things on like social media. And my uncle wrote me once in my book. This is my father was still alive, and he said, "I just want you to know." It might have been my dad writing through his page, that your dad is so proud of you. And we're looking at your Facebook, and I probably saw all types of shit. Like I don't even know what trans mean. They're like, I don't know what that mean. He got all them colors rainbow on. I don't know. But but he's like, I'm proud of you, and we love you. Yeah. And I say that particularly to push back against the idea that these types of black people are the ones that lack forward thinking, analysis.
Sure.
No. Like, they are the ones that were like, for those who lack analysis. Sure.
Say it.
We about to show up on the scene. We're going to show you how to get some analysis.
Say
you know
it.
what I'm saying? Like,
Say it.
I've been protected and kept alive by my black ass family from Camden, New Jersey. And I'm so grateful, and I have to always say that everywhere I go. So in as much as they too were fed those messages, without me having to go off to college and come back with a sort of shitload of language and theory, they had already started the work of queering our space. Far before I would name myself pro-feminist, far before I read Audre Lorde, my mama and my sisters were in there loving the hell out of me and practicing a feminist politic, an intersectional politic, without me ever having to use those words. My uncles were protecting me from the words that some boys were probably saying on the street or their friends. Like, I still remember coming home one day and hearing my sisters cuss this girl out. And by the time they got to the block closest to me, they stopped. They made her shut up completely. What they had been arguing about is she was saying, "Oh, Darnell got a boyfriend, blah, blah, blah." And they was like, "Well, I don't care what you not going to do," that type of thing. And they just, like, as they got closer to me, they never said anything to me about it. Never said anything. But they were, they wanted, like, they don't even know I heard them.
Right.
But that's the type of family I had that's like, and so many of our black families are like that.
Yes. And I love that you're extracting the richness and putting it on display. Like, it's like that is here, and it's our own. Mm-hmm. I want to kind of make a quick bridge to how all of this amazing things that we've been talking about informs your activism.
Sure.
You are a tremendous human being, and then now you've taken it upon yourself to really bring that love, bring that learning, bring all of that to spaces to advocate for others. I mean, does it start with compassion? Does it start with accountability? Does it start with... That
was nice to be called tremendous. We are all tremendous. I'm just out here. I don't know what the fuck I am. I'm just out here. But I talk about radical black love all the time, and my way of defining that is, again, I use narrative. I come from, like I said, a family that would never let anyone, really. And I mean, we've had people in our home. And just to paint a picture, there were times where some of us were sleeping on the floor, the couch, the basement, all over the house, because my grandparents would let people in so that they would not be put on the street. And neighbors who would later call us, like, play cut. That's my cousin, that's my uncle. Aunts and uncles who went off and got married and lost homes would come back to this house. The aunt or uncle or cousin that cussed you out the day before, the one that stole some shit, the one that was out slinging drugs or addicted, all would be let back in the house. And it haunts me in the best way possible, and I hope it never stops. because when I think about our political life and when I think about movement work, that's the first thing that comes to mind. This is why I cannot dispose of black people.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah,
because they ain't dispose of any of us.
Yep.
And
that second thought
is at the heart of my organizing work. And it's why I'm thinking hard all the time about the people who, you know, you let them back in. You may have to lock your door. You may have to say, I'm locking my shit up because you like to steal. But I'm not going to let you be out there on the street. And you are going to get something to eat. I watched them row together and give their, I swear to you, like last dime, go broke to make sure that somebody could get off to school like I did. Or if somebody needed that rent, getting $20 from this one, $100 from that one. I mean, this is what my family, and to this day, literally, my mom just took in my grandmother and my aunt in a home that's modest. But we don't know anything different. And that to me is at the heart of what I've seen in my community growing up in Camden, New Jersey. And it has shaped me as an activist and as an organizer, really.
And can I just say, like, that I'm really grateful for that? Because what if you weren't? Like, it's like that love. It's like, can your family give classes on how to be human, on how to be compassionate, how to be there for other people, how to be there for themselves, you know? Like, I mean, we talk all day, every day on the show about how we're not connected, about how we're not willing to touch through to our own humanity and other people's humanity. And this is exactly the type of accountability / compassion / just like in general seeing each other that we're missing. And so I just applaud that.
I give them so much up. I actually remember the first time I brought a friend of mine who was a gender nonconforming trans person actually home. I didn't even know that language. I may have been 19 or 20. It was just like, hey, what's up? I don't know. It don't matter. We don't need the title. You here. You're in our home. Do you need to eat? You know what I'm saying? You good?
Yeah.
Kudos to them. And translate that to like 2 decades later when I'm actually working with queer and trans young people. My mom's like, we were in Philly. We took them on a trip from New York to Philly, and table full of young trans youth. My mom like, I'm coming. And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, I wonder how she's gonna navigate the language, and they are like, oh my God, like I love your mom, like we want to be around her, like don't let her go. And I was just watching like this. Our people know.
Yeah.
I'm just grateful. Some of our people know. Let me be clear.
All right, cool. Well, listen, thank you so much for being on the show today.
So
real.
Grateful.
I mean, like,
it's incredible.
This is incredible. You guys, if you have not read No Ashes in the Fire, if you do nothing else, please read it. It's a quick read. It's like 225 pages, 230 pages. Get it, read it, share it. And
I should shout out.
Oh, yes, please.
So Charlene Carruthers' book, Unapologetic, A Black, Queer, and Feminist Mandate for Radical Movements just came out. Get it. It's okay. So, you know, we have the narratives, and then we have our field guide, and Charlene, who was the national director for BYP 100, Black Youth Project 100, and is a sort of commendable leader in her own right, has a good word for us. Super, super good.
Yeah, we should get that out on social media.
Yeah,
so people can see it.
Definitely post that up. Great. So is there actually anything else you'd like to plug? When we plug No Ashes in the Fire, we plug, you know.
And some other good books. Eloquent Rage by Brittany Cooper is a necessary read.
Yes,
it is so powerful, and it's so necessary, and it's a book that I think can help definitely give Black girls and women that lift that they need, but it's a book for Black men and boys too. And also look out for Kiese Layman, whose memoir Heavy is soon to be released. It's a book about a Black man who's talking about weight, who's looking at the intersection of he's talking about fat shaming and male body imaging, particularly within himself, and how his sort of woes around masculinity led him to eat. which was one type of violence, and then led him to be engaged with women. I mean, it's so good. It's nothing like this has sort of been written before. And the last book I'll say too is Patrisse Cullor and Asha Bandele. Patrisse was one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter Global Network. When They Call You a Terrorist. And the book is a memoir, which really looks at, in the same way, how her community, her family really was shaped by the onslaught of like white supremacist violence, militarized police, law enforcement in their communities, and so much else. But yeah.
All right, well, we'll be posting all of that on our social medias. Darnell, where can the people find you?
I am on all the social medias. It's like more Darnell. Sometimes like the underscore in between. I never can tell. I can't remember.
Okay, cool. I'll find you. I'll post
it's always like more Darnell. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we do want more Darnell. Thank you so much for coming. I know there's a little pun for you guys there. So you guys, please do check out our social media. We're going to be posting all of Darnell's information and all of the books that he shouted out today. So that's going to be Masculinity Pod on Twitter. That's with a K. Masculinity Podcast on Facebook, again with a K. And Masculinity Pod on Instagram, turns out, as well. So you guys, thank you guys so much for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to hit us up at masculinitypodcast@whoistheo.com and leave us a review. Let us know how you like the podcast.
Hey, crazy. You can leave a review?
I know.
Leave a damn review.
Leave some stars. You know, we're on Stitcher, we're on iTunes, we're on SoundCloud, you know, all of the places. And Radio Public now.
Radio Public. There's a lot of places. I don't even know
where. A lot of new shit.
Wherever you listen to it, leave a damn review.
All right, cool. Thank you guys for listening. My name is Samantha Nzesi.
It's your boy, Ramoy George Phillip. Swish, swish, Phillip. The first.
And this has been Masculinity. Peace.
Ciao.